Council, if you could take a look at your agenda for this evening. Ordinances under final reading, items A through J. I will be asking to take those as a group this evening. Just let me know if there are any objections to that. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilman Ledford.
Madam Chair, thank you. I just wanted to make sure and note that in our note, we had amendments to the conditions on our zoning cases, and I see that they are noted in a packet from RPA. Mm-hmm. So
The packet,
I think our I's are crossed and our T's dotted. Okay.
Yes, thank you so much for the update, and we do have those, like I said, in our packet. Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yes.
all right. All right, under ordinances for first reading, we have one item there. Any comments or questions? And please hit your light if there are any comments or questions regarding these items. Public Works, we have item under transportation. We have resolutions, economic development, equity and community engagement, public works, and wastewater. Any comments or questions there? All right. If you will take a look at your next week's proposed agenda, and if there are any comments or questions, please hit your light. All right. Under purchasing, any questions on the purchasing? I know there is one update. Brooke, is Brooke here? Okay, give us an update on one of the purchasing items for our 6 p.m. agenda.
Yes, the first item, is you're going to request that it is withdrawn. With the bin is here, yes, the bill is here. You left it.
All right.
Yes, this was a bid for traffic control rental, and it came in much higher than we expected. So we're asking to hold off on awarding it so we can look into other options.
All right, thank you, Ben. And Valerie, just to confirm, so they do want to withdraw this as well. Does it need a separate vote? Or can we vote on it as we typically do on purchasing, noting that this
You
can be
can do it
withdrawn?
noting that with the other purchase items as a package, but just note that it's been withdrawn
Okay, all right.
in one vote.
In one vote, okay, thank you so much. Council, if you would take a look at your future considerations. Any comments or questions? Okay. Councilwoman Coon.
I'm sorry, I was coughing during the time, but I do have a question about this one, purchase that we have.
Right.
I don't hear about the advertisement, and then the explanation is saying because it's reaching an African-American target market. According to the news, gun violence happening in every district. So we should be spreading the message on every radio station, not just on 94.3. I think it's discriminatory. I think it's very biased for us to just assume it's just happening in one target group. We just talked about that. Like, it's happening everywhere. And can we address this, please?
Yes. Sole source purchases. That's you, Jermaine. All right.
Yes, so what we could do is we could go back and look at, to see if we could expand some of what the advertising strategy is. I certainly think that we could potentially start with Power 94, and then see if we could expand that to other radio stations.
Okay, thank you.
All right. All right, you good, Councilwoman Coonrod?
I'm good.
All right, thank you. Any other questions on the purchases or future considerations? All right. Today, we have a departmental report about the fire and police pension by Mr. Chris Hopkins.
Thank you very much. And I do have a slide deck if that's available.
It should be. And also it was in our folders as well.
Okay, great. So it's a pleasure to be back in front of you again. It's been my honor to serve as your representative to the Fire and Police Pension Fund for about 5 years now. I thought on the very first page I'd mention our new logo. It was designed by one of our firefighters, believe it or not, and it is exceptional. So we've adopted that as our new logo. I thought I'd take a little different tack and sprout some numbers today, and we'll have numbers later on. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on the history of the fund and how we're structured. So the fund actually goes back to 1949. has a long and proud history. It's administered by three.
Mr.
of full-
Hopkins, real quick, yes.
I'm sorry.
The presentation isn't up on our screen.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Hopkins. Just a second. Is it up here? Yes. Is it up on this screen here?
It is on this one.
Oh, here we go. I think it's coming.
All right. There we go. All right, thank you.
You guys, everybody see it now?
Yes.
All right, so there's the logo. Yeah, excellent. I could see it just fine. It actually looks better up there than it did on my laptop. So that's our new logo. It was created by one of our firefighters. But I did want to talk a little bit about the structure of our pension fund. Going back to 1949, it's administered by three very capable full-time employees. Katrina Abbott, whom you've met before as our fund administrator, served for many years as the deputy administrator, our deputy Christina Culpepper, and Doug Kelly, who's a longtime servant of the city of Chattanooga. In addition to our staff, the fund is actually operated and supervised by an 8-member board of trustees, 6 of whom are elected sworn officers, 3 from the police department, 3 from the fire department. There's 1 city council appointee, which is myself, and then Julia Birch, who is the mayor's appointee. So I thought you've probably not had a chance to see all our trustees. I'd just like to mention them: firefighters Britt Bradshaw, Scott Sparks, and Matt Rorix, and police officers Philip McLean, Joe Shaw, and Michael Wenger, in addition to myself and Julia. So it has been a distinct honor for me to serve alongside these dedicated officers from fire and police. It's going to be difficult to convey to you how seriously they take their responsibilities and how much time they put into the supervision of the pension fund. So if you do get a chance and you run into one of them, thank them on behalf of the city and on your own behalf, because they do a tremendous job. They put in a huge amount of time, and they take their responsibility very seriously. So thank you to all those elected members. The role of the Board of Trustees is to supervise the pension fund, oversight of the pension fund investments. We have a third-party investment consultant with whom we work, as well as an actuarial firm. But it's the role of the Board of Trustees to oversee the operation. The trustees are each individually fiduciaries, which means we have a legal obligation to each member of the pension fund. So 6 of the 8 members of the Board of Trustees are also participants in the fund, which is just a little bit unusual, not totally unique, but in terms of first responder pension funds, for 6 of the 8 trustees to be sworn officers is a bit unusual. And it gives them an interesting and unique perspective. So they're operating on their own behalf as well as behalf of all the other participants in the fund. So again, my thanks to all those sworn officers. This is probably not going to come as any big shock, but defined benefit traditional pension plans are under pressure, partly due to some demographic trends. And this one is an illustration of what's happened to life expectancy going back to 1960. An individual born in 1960 would have a life expectancy of a little less than 70 years. Somebody born today would have a life expectancy of about 77 years. So there's about a 10% increase in life expectancy, which means a significant increase in the number of years after retirement that defined pension plans have to provide for, which is why in most cases in the private sector, defined benefit plans just don't exist any longer. They've moved to defined contribution plans. But for a number of reasons, that doesn't really work for first responders. They have shorter life expectancies. They have more physically taxing jobs. They tend to retire earlier and have longer on the plan. They just don't have enough time typically to save enough in a defined contribution plan like a 403B, 401K. So it's very important we continue to support defined benefit plans for our first responders in particular. But you can see some of the challenges we face, and as a result, you can see with the blue line here, the number of active participants in defined benefit plans has substantially declined since the 70s, while defined contribution 401K plans have skyrocketed, again, partly as a result of those demographic changes, longer life expectancies, and so on and so forth. In particular, the plan here in Chattanooga has the same demographic challenges. I won't get into too much of this, but the purple bars are retirees currently in the plan. The blue bars are active participants right now still working. And the red line is the ratio. So if you go back to 2014, there were 91 retirees for every 100 active officers. Today, there are 101 retirees for every 100 active participants. So it doesn't take too much math to understand the challenges inherent in the plan, notwithstanding the investment performance of the plan. So just to give you a little taste of some of the challenges of defined benefits. This is a chart going back to 2001 of the market value of the assets in our pension plan, the Chattanooga Fire and Police Pension Fund. And as you can see, it's a rocky ride, and we had a substantial event back in 2008. Many of us remember that very unpleasant time when we had the great financial crisis. But in addition to other areas of our life, the pension fund experienced about a 33% loss in one single year. We were at one time 100% fund, going back to the 90s. So our funding status was cut drastically. And then that period, beginning in 2008, for the next decade, the results were lackluster, let's say at best. We lagged the market on average over time. I'm going to address some of the changes we've made to correct that successfully, I think, in the last 5 years. As I think you can see, going back to 2019, the results look much more favorable. So we're clearly on a trajectory to recover from that really devastating period of time, devastating loss. Those who were here at the time in 2014, remember there was a task force to address the funding crisis in the pension fund, and some changes were made to benefits that we hope to address going forward and recover those as we continue to improve our status. At any time, by the way, if there are any questions that are on your mind, please feel free to interrupt me before I wander down the road too far. So I'll get into this a little bit later, but the City Council has been extremely faithful in funding the pension fund. We provide our estimate of the required contribution each year, and frankly, it's a heavy lift for the City of Chattanooga, given the investment experience back to 2008. So as you can see, this is a very rocky road. What we do in pension accounting is we try to smooth that out. We average that over a rolling 5-year period. So the city's contribution each year, beginning again this year on July 1st, is based on that smooth average. That blue line is a little bit less volatile. We wouldn't want to come to the city and say we need 50% this year, 70% next year, 20% the year after. So those in pension accounting are based on a smooth average. So you can see we lagged behind our actuarial average for quite some time after the 2008 collapse of the market, and that we have substantially recovered and have spent the last 3 years really above that. It was only the 22 market decline that caused us to fall below, but we're on a trajectory to exceed that again. So great progress from an investment standpoint. I will take just a minute to kind of highlight the actual numbers. The first quarter, that first column there, you see Q1 2023. For the first quarter of this year, which is the last period of time we have a full accounting for, the fund had a 4.5% rate of return for the quarter. And that put us in the 39th percentile nationwide, which means we were in the top 39% of 100 of all comparable pension funds. Going back to 2022, we fell a little bit below the 50th percentile, but as you can see, for the last 3 years and 5 years, we've been in the top half of public pension funds in terms of our investment performance. I would add that back in that period of time, going back to the 08, 09 through maybe 2017 period, we were typically in the lower third.
All right, Mr.
So,
Hopkins, we do
yeah.
have a question.
Certainly.
Quick clarifying question,
course.
please, Chris. You said we were in the 39th percentile, I'm a mom whose kids take TCAP. 39th percentile is the opposite of good in TCAP. 99th percentile is where you want to be. So you're telling me this 39th is good?
Yes, it's the top. Yeah, it's probably the opposite of the TCAPs, right?
Okay.
So the lower the number, the better.
Okay,
Does that make sense? Yeah, in fact, that probably is the opposite of the way they measure the TCAP.
okay.
So when we say the 99th percentile, that would be the top 1% of all pension funds.
But we're in the 39th percentile,
I
which
mean,
is the bottom.
the 99th would be the bottom, I'm sorry, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, just the
We
opposite
got
of
the
what.
opposite.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you for clarifying that, because above 50 is good. I mean, the number below 50 means we're in the top half. Right?
Okay, got it.
Right? Yeah, I totally confuse everybody here. So we want to be in the first
39 is
percentile,
good.
right?
Okay, all right. Any more questions, Councilwoman Hill? Madam Vice Chair
That's all
Hill?
for now, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, good. Thank you for clarifying that. So as you can see, that anything, a number lower than 50 is above average. And we have been consistently above average for the last 5 years now, since we made a change to our pension consulting firm. Again, a little bit more about which later. So let me talk a little bit, just to get a head start on Councilman Ledford before he even asks me what the rate of return, assumed rate of return is. I did want to kind of go back and reflect that assumed rate of return in actuarial accounting, you have to kind of pick a number that you think is a reasonable estimate of what you're going to earn over time. And that's the rate you use to discount future obligations, right? So we look at, say, 30 years ahead to fire and police pension retirements. We discount those obligations back at that assumed rate of return. And the higher the number, the lower the obligation today. So we at one time in 1992 had a 9% assumed rate of return. In other words, it was assumed that a balanced portfolio of stocks and bonds was going to earn 9% year in and year out. Well, for part of the 1990s, that was true, but historically over time, it's certainly not. So we have systematically reduced that assumed rate of return. And every time I've come in front of you, I think we've notched it down one more quarter. We are stable now at 6.75%. So what that does mean is it increases our immediate obligation. It's a bigger number that we're dealing with in terms of our present value of future obligations, which means the city's contribution to the pension plan is bigger, which is why we've had to do this very incrementally. We don't think we're going to need to move from that. 6.75 puts us right in the middle of the national average for assumed rates of return. I should mention as well that I think council knew this very well, but at the time that they passed the salary increase last year, the 25% salary increase, that also impacted the solvency of the pension fund. It increased our current obligation because the future obligations essentially went up by 25% based on those last 5 years of pay. So that also increased the obligation to the pension fund today. It had about a 3 percentage point impact on our funded status. So as we sit here today, our funded status is about 51.5%, which means we could, if we had to stop and liquidate the plan and pay out today, we could pay about 51% of the obligations. At one time, we were around 42%. And I want to emphasize that this is not a problem you can correct overnight. It's a very long runway, and it begins with a number of incremental changes over time that compound. And we're 5 years into that process, and I think we're right on track. We were actually briefly before the 22 market correction, we had hit 60%. And then, of course, we had a 18% decline in the market in 22, and the bond market was down 10 or 11%. So on balance, we are on a glide path that I want to show you in a minute. Experience losses, we go through every year and we do an experience study based on actual performance and things like the expenses in the plan, disability claims, and so on and so forth. And we go back and look at those, and our experience loss over the last year added about another % to our funding deficit. In other words, we had a much higher rate of disability claims than we had originally projected. So these things all add up to about a 3, 4, 5% decrease in the funded status. The decrease from the salary increases was a one-time hit that's factored in now going forward, right? And again, I want to thank you on behalf of the sworn officers for that action. You know, as you know, we were struggling to fill a lot of empty slots in the police and fire department, so that went a long way in my experience in dealing with these great people. I guess my last point is I'd like to thank the city for so faithfully funding this planned deficit. It's been obviously a struggle for us. And I won't get into a lot of the nitty-gritty, but the bottom line is if you look at line 10 there, beginning July 1st of this year, the city's contribution to the pension fund is nearly 50% of payroll. All right, and the national average is probably at 20-ish. So the city of Chattanooga is more than carrying the load. And looking back through 25 years of records, I cannot find a year in which City Council did not fully fund the required contribution. That has not been the case in every city in America. And in a lot of cities in America, it's been far from the case. And had that not happened, the pension fund would be in substantial difficulty. As we sit here today, we're on what I consider to be a pretty good glide path to get us back to solvency. So I guess in conclusion, what I wanted to do is just touch on a few of the highlights of the last 5 years since we changed pension consulting firms. We had been working with another firm for maybe 20 years. We engaged a firm called DeHaab and Associates out of Long Island, New York, and they've come in and helped us reestablish or rewrite our investment policy statement. We have made a substantial shift in our investment policies. We had about a third of the fund in 2015-16 was invested in high-cost hedge funds that were underperforming. So they not only were they not hitting their market benchmarks, they had extremely high expenses and fees. So we have now completely wound down. We're no longer in any high-cost hedge fund positions. It takes about 3 years to get out of them. Our investment returns now are consistently in the top half, and in several quarters been in the top third nationwide. This is really significant. We've reduced our annual expenses on investments by about 43%. We've cut about $700,000 a year out of our investment expenses and fees in terms of the managers that we engage and by using lower cost options and by getting out of some of those hedge funds. We recently engaged Miller & Martin to represent the pension fund, and we've just been extremely pleased with the representation from Chris Crevasse, many of you may know, and they have just done a tremendous job for us. Probably not even charged us for a lot of the time that they took to get up to speed with us. We're very grateful to Miller & Martin for sharpening their pencil and coming in and doing a great job. So again, probably to foreclose on Councilman Ledford's next question, what's our run rate here? And as we're currently on this glide path to about a 70% funded ratio by 2035. So as I mentioned, it's a long time horizon. It takes a lot of time. But we have been in touch with the state treasurer. I try to stay in touch with Treasurer Lillard, keep them apprised of what we're doing. They're pleased with our progress. The 70% benchmark makes a difference because once we hit that level, retirees will begin to get cost of living increases the year they retire. As it stands right now, there's a 3-year delay as a result of those compromises in 2014 because of our funding crisis. 80% is important because right now the cost of living increase is limited to 1.5%. Once we hit 80%, it becomes the CPI up to a maximum of 3. So once we get back to 80%, all of the cost of living increases have returned as they originally were scheduled to do. And so our goal is to be at 80% by 2040. Conservative estimate is we're on track for that.
All right. Chris, thank you so much. And Councilman Ledford. Right here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I feel like I've got to say something after all those references, Chris. So, Chris, you know I've had a very strong interest in the Fire and Police Pension Fund, and I appreciate you taking the time to help educate me with some of the numbers and the progress. So, first of all, a big shout out to you. Thank you for what you do. I don't believe you receive payment for what you do. This is a service from your heart and love, and we thank you. And I think Councilman Smith was the one who brought you to us.
That's correct.
And if my memory serves, and I want to thank you for that because Chris has been stellar. Please send our thank you to Katrina, Christina, and Doug as well, and all the sworn officers. It sounds like to me you are running this like a business rather than running it like a government, which I think is awesome because the fire and police pension, as I look across to some of my favorite first responders back here, this is important to them. This is very important to them, and it's important to our city. I'm glad you mentioned that some cities don't fully fund their pension plans and have had issues in the past. Well, not this city, and hopefully not ever. So I just wanted to say thank you. Thanks for covering the numbers on the ARR and other things that I know I've had interest in the past. Always anxious to see what you're up to next and how you're really looking at the numbers and trying to solidify this and make sure that it's here for the future. For our first responders. I can't thank you enough. So that's really what I wanted to say.
And I appreciate that, and basically right back at you as far as the council's concerned, because without your support of the plan, we wouldn't be on this glide path to improvement. And it took, frankly, some of us may have been around during the 2014 period of time. It was not a pleasant time. It was difficult. And the fact that we got through that has put us in a much better position. And it does take patience. It's not an immediate fix, but we're on the right path. And I think our members feel that way. So I want to make sure that I express my appreciation to the City Council for your support.
All right, thank you so much, Chris. And is that it, Councilman Ledford?
That's it. Thank you,
All right,
Madam
thank
Chair.
you. Any other comments or questions? All right, I don't see any additional lights. Well, Chris, thank you so much.
Thank you all very much.
For your presentation. We appreciate you for your service and time. We don't have any committees today, council, and if there's no other business, we will adjourn until 6.